going to take a look at tying a fly on a jig hook today, a nymph on a jig hook, a beadhead nymph too. The reason I want to show this is because to put a normal bead on a jig head hook doesn't work that great. It looks kind of strange, it looks kind of funny. The bead kind of tilts down and you can't really tie around it, so the top part of the bead is left exposed, and you can, it's kind of like almost like a gap there. Or if to fill in that gap, you've got to really build up the bottom on the underside of the bead, which creates a big ball of kind of almost, and covers sort of part of your bead on the underside. It just doesn't look great. What you really need is a slotted bead. A slotted bead goes on a jig hook perfectly and looks perfect. The problem is slotted beads can be difficult to find, at least where I live. I live in a decent sized city, a big city actually, and we have 5 or 6 fly shops and another 2 or 3 sort of multi-purpose shops, including a Bass Pro shops, and you can't get slotted beads here. I have not been able to find them. So what I've done is I've come up with just a different way to put a bead on a hook, specifically these jig hooks, so that you can use a normal bead, a normal tungsten or brass, whatever bead, and still use a jig hook. I like the jig hooks because they tend not to snag up as much, and they ride point up or point back, rear facing if you will, and they do well. So we got a size 14 Tiemco jig hook in here today, and we're going to tie a pattern called the Evilweevil. I don't think the color really matters, but this is a green Benecki 12-aught thread, and we're just going to lay down a layer of thread, come back to about the barb of the hook there, and cut off our excess. The tail of this fly is pheasant tail fiber, so I'm going to use a natural colored pheasant tail like this, and I'm going to grab some fibers. I don't count them, but usually I'm sure probably what I'm grabbing is about 5 or 6 fibers or so. Like I said, I don't usually count them, I just kind of know by looking at it. Then what I want to do is I want roughly half the shank length of the shank of the hook itself is sort of the length of the tail. And you know, if I tie it in, I don't particularly like it, or I think it's maybe just a bit long, I can shorten them up a little bit like that before I put a bunch of wraps on there and really crank them down. But we're going to really secure this now by securing that pheasant tail to the top of the hook shank. We're going to try and keep it at the top. We're going to move it to its midpoint of the hook and cut off our excess. And now we're going to put the bead on. So I'm going to use a tungsten bead, a black tungsten bead, size 2.4 mil, a 2.4 or 3/32 black tungsten bead. You could use a gold bead, or you could even use another color, red or something, maybe to make a sort of stand out more. But I like black. Black is the sort of original tie, black or gold. We're going to take our bead, and we're going to take what I bought a bunch of these craft pins. They're like a stick pin. They're not a sewing pin. They're like a stick pin for crafts. I'm not sure what they use them for, but anyways, they have a blunt end, and then they have a head on the other end, and they're made from very soft materials. You can get them in different colors and different sizes, and they're dirt cheap. At least here they are. I get the pack of 10 for 80 cents, so they're very cheap. So you put the bead on the pin. The head of the pin stops the bead from sliding off. So now the bead is on the pin. And then what you want to do is cut away the majority of the pin. You don't need it all. We just want a small stubby end of it, maybe something like that, size 14. Again, you don't want too much, just want enough to fit on top of the shank of your hook. Something like that. And cut it. Cuts pretty easy. You want to use an older pair of scissors to do that, and use the back part of the scissors so you don't hack up the front of it. But now we're just going to put that on top, right on top of the shank of the jig hook, and we're just going to tie that in. And we just want to make sure we get it right on top, so I just do any final adjustments I've got to do, and then I just wrap that in. The other thing I like to do now is I like to take some glue I like to add a bit of glue to that. I really want that to stick on there and not slide off or slide around. So I just take the glue and then I spread it around with my bodkin, make sure that it's where it needs to, you know, soaked into the thread all the way around and really binds down to that shank of the hook. The only other thing you got to watch for now is that the end you've cut there is a blunt end and it's going to be a bit sharp. So what I try to do is just kind of gently, without really putting a lot of pressure on the thread, I try to cover up that sharp edge with some thread wraps so that when I'm coming back with my dubbing or whatever, I don't accidentally sever my thread on that sharp edge. So the next thing we need is we need our wire. The original pattern calls for gold wire, like a hare's ear. I don't have any gold, but I do have a bunch of this brassy size hot yellow wire kicking around, and I like this. It's a little brighter than gold, but it's still similar enough that it doesn't really change the appearance of the fly that much. Maybe just makes things a little brighter. So we're going to take some of that. We're going to tie that in. Just like so on the side. And the next thing we're going to need is some shell back material. I'm just using scud back, 1/8 of an inch midge flex, scud back, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same stuff. You could tie this with a flashback style and use pearl, tinsel or pearl mylar tinsel, whatever, for the back if you wanted more of a flashback style nymph. The original, that's not how it's tied originally, and since I'm doing the original tie, I'm going to stick to the original, which was just a clear shell back on it. And you could use this scud back, or you could use midge flex, which I'm using, or you could use thin skin. Really doesn't matter. It's just you want something that's fairly translucent but still has a bit of shine to it. We'll tie that in, and I'm just going to cut some of this off. I don't need all of it like that. It's too hard to work with, so do that. For dubbing, we're going to use Arizona peacock dubbing. In the body is light peacock. This is very fine dubbing. It's cut very short. Your fibers are very short, not long. So it can be sometimes, it's actually very easy to dub with, but I find, but it does take a little bit of practice. If you're used to the longer fiber synthetics, shorter stuff takes a little more to work with, but it's it'll dub a really fine tight noodle, or it'll dub a thicker noodle. I don't mind keeping it a little on the thicker side. This is just sort of a general searching pattern, so I'm not really trying to imitate Baetis or anything like that. You could use this to imitate Baetis or other smaller mayflies by dubbing a really thin noodle on it, but for me this is more of a searching pattern. I don't mind it a little bit, a little bushy, a little buggier looking. Okay, so that goes like that. We'll pull our shell back over, stretch it a little bit, and tie it in, just like that. And now we'll put a 1/2 inch in there, get my thread out of the way so I can ribbit with the hot yellow wire. Get some ribbing on it like that. And we can tie that off. Now just worry that wire off like that. Twist it off. Now I'm going to pull that shell back, or wrap back a little bit here to kind of where we finished dubbing this abdomen, or the body of the fly. We need to put on a couple goose biots. These are tan goose biots. You could use kind of any color. Actually, these are a bit small. I'm going to go with these goose biots here. These are amber goose biots. Again, I don't think color really matters. Brown, tan, amber, whatever. It's more the function of them than the color of them. You want those to be roughly the length of the body. Come to the end of the body when you tie them in. We'll tie one in on that side and one in on the other side. You want the curve facing out so that you get a nice flare on them. Just oops, too much. There we go. Just like that. A few wraps on that, and we can cut off the excess by it. Like that. And now we need to dub the thorax. Thorax is the same material, just a different color. It's natural peacock, Arizona synthetic dubbing and natural peacock. And again, I don't think you need to use Arizona synthetic peacock dubbing. It's whatever you got. It's sort of the same sort of colorations, but this is a nice dubbing to use for tying nymphs and even for dry flies. Dub up a nice buggy thorax with this. And then for my last wrap, I'm going to come around. I'm just going to go around the pin that has the bead on it. Instead of both the hook shank and the bead, the pin with the bead, I'm just going to go around the pin with the bead on it. Pull the shell back over. Pull that in. Again, just going around the pin, not the pin and the hook. Give that a couple of nice tight wraps. Pull it back. Wrap in behind it. Really secure it. And then what you can do is give it a bit of a pull, stretch it, and cut it. And now, fly's basically done. We're going to add some glue. I always add glue by just putting the glue on the thread. Since I started doing that, I mean, this is the only way to put glue on your flies now, instead of trying to put it on the head of a pin or whatever and bodkin and try to get it in there. You just put it right on the thread, wrap it right around, it gets right in there. Run a whip finish on it, right into the wet glue, and she's bomb proof now. It's not coming apart. At least not till you've caught a few fish, and that is the Evilweevil. One of the better searching flies you're ever going to find. And it's tied on a jig hook here. And that's the way you can put a normal bead on a jig hook. With very little expense. It looks a little different, but it's going to fish excellent. Still going to have the weight of the bead, the tungsten weight or the lead weight. You can put lead wire on that too, for that matters. You can tie this any pattern. It'll work. I'm just showing you one, but you can use that method of putting a bead on a jig hook, and you're going to be just fine. The Evilweevil can be tied in different ways. There's one with a gold bead on there, and then you can also tie them with the flashback on, like those guys. Those are all tied on jig hooks, and we'll see you. Hope it helps. Tie some flies. Get out and go fishing. Thanks.